third grade. Today we're going to do lesson 3. We're going to order numbers, put them in order from smallest to biggest. We call that least to greatest. Or we can put them in order from biggest to smallest, and we call that greatest to least. So be careful. We can do that either way, and a lot of times in practice books they'll ask you, and so you have to look at the directions and make sure, does it say order them from the smallest or least to the biggest or greatest, or is it asking you to do the other direction and put the biggest first and go down to the smallest, greatest to least? There are two different helpful guides that we can kind of help us, models or strategies. One is to use a number line, and we've already used the place value chart. So we'll look at both of those. And then it's going to be really important when you write these numbers. There's some pretty big numbers, and we're going to use our finger, kind of like you do sometimes when you were a little bit younger perhaps, and you were writing sentences, and the teacher said in between each word you need to leave a space. So I, space, like, space with your finger, pizza, and then put your period at the end. So we're going to need to put spaces between our numbers so they don't look like one big huge mess, and it'll be really hard to read numbers if they're all put together. So you actually use a semicolon, and a semicolon has a dot and a comma, but that's what you're going to see in your book, and we're going to write that with our finger space. So it means that there's a space between numbers. It's not the same number, and so we'll look at those, and let's get started. Lesson 3, order numbers. Make sure your book is open to that page. And how can numbers be expressed, ordered, and compared? Big words. We're really focused on our order, but we're comparing the smallest to the biggest. That's what that means. And then we're going to show that by writing the numbers and putting our finger to make sure that we leave space between each number. And usually there'll be 3 numbers that we have to put in order. So let's look at an example here. One way is to use a place value chart. So you can have your place value chart out and a marker, and you can always push play and get yourself a little more organized. It says here that this family, the Odell family, they went whale watching. Well, you'd have to be in the ocean. You'd have to go out in the ocean. That's a ways from Minnesota, but they might be a little closer to the ocean. Anyway, they took a boat out. Here's a picture of our whale there. And here's the length. There's 3 types of whales: an orca whale, a blue whale, and a humpback whale. And this is telling you how many inches long that is. Pretty big, we know that. So we'll need big numbers in order to identify those length of those whales. Well, one way is to put in a number chart, and you're going to need to put in 3 of the numbers right here. 264 inches here, hundreds, tens, ones. 1,000, here's the comma, 1, and then we say 1,000, 128, and they put that in here, and then 744 inches for the humpback whale. I think it's easy to look right here and see the biggest whale, and if you look in the place value chart, you can see the biggest whale, and it says 1,000 is the greatest. So we already know the greatest. And we start from the left. So this is going to be very important. We start looking at the numbers from the left. So we're looking this way, and we see this has more digits, 4 digits, 1 in the thousands. Then we're going to look next at the hundreds. So if we look at those 2, the 7 and the 2, the 700s is bigger than the 200s, so we know that will be next. So the biggest whale, or the longest whale, is the blue whale. The next one, 7 in the hundreds and only 2 in the hundreds, is the humpback whale, and then the smallest, or the least, is the orca whale. Another way to look at it is using a number line, and I want you to remember that this arrow means numbers go all the way back to 0. And on this side, we would have numbers that go all the way forever. bigger and bigger. Numbers to the left are less than. So we have, each one of these is marked 100. So 200, 300, and in between here would be 100 numbers. That's a lot. Well, the line would be too big. We could never show all those numbers. So we're going to make our number line, and we're going to show counting by hundreds, knowing that there are 100 numbers in between there, but we couldn't possibly write all those numbers, 201, 202. But we do know that 264 is somewhere in the middle and probably a little bit farther this way, because 250 would be exactly in the middle. 264, and you can see that this whale is up between 700 and 800, 744, and remember the blue whale was the largest between 1,100 and 1,200. So we're going to count by hundreds, starting at 0, 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 1,000, we start over, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, and so on. So this number line is counting by 100. It helps us to kind of see where the numbers are bigger and smaller. So the order from least to greatest, least, the smallest. And again, the smallest is 264. And if we were writing this, we'd put our finger and put a space, and then we'd write the next numbers, 744. So 264 is less than 744, and 744 is less than space 1,128. Don't forget the comma, 1,000. The order from least to greatest is 264 inches, 744 inches, and 1,128. You can push pause, make sure you've got that. I want to remind everybody that you can always go under the Austin Public Schools, go underneath Family, and go down to McGraw-Hill. And the student book is there with lots and lots of helpful information. Always a really, really good place to go, even after the assignment. There's some fun games on there. There's some tools you can play around with. Lots of information. Takes a little practice navigating. You can click something like this. That's a tutor. That's McGraw-Hill. You can see that Mr. Brzezinski has all these options. You can click any of those. This one is tools. You hover over it and it will tell you exactly what it is. Let me do that right now. You may not be able to see that on your screen. That one says you can watch a video. This one says it's a tutor that will help you. This one has tools, and there's a lot there. It takes some practice. Believe me, Mr. B has practiced, and I'm still learning it. But there are a lot of tools that you can use there, counters and tens and protractors. And this one is for e-help. It's really what we're doing right now. This one has some worksheets, and you won't need that. And that is Spanish. So lots of helpful information there. All right. We had the greatest number, the second greatest number, and we're going to go ahead and try that again on this page now. So example 2, I'm sorry, Mr. B is going to go to the guided practice. That's what we need to do. All right, order the numbers from least to greatest, and we're going to practice with our place value charts. So let's slide this up. And remember, I said you'd see this little thing called a semicolon, and that tells you that there's a number here, and that is separating. You're going to put your finger and leave a space, and then a number, a space, and a number for 3 numbers. Let's look at the greatest place. Is that, well, there's nothing in the hundreds. The next greatest place is the tens. Can you see which one is the biggest? Easy, 68. It says to least to greatest. So we don't want to put this one first. That would be greatest. So we're going to put that one last, 68. And then these two in the tens are the same. So we're trying to find the smallest first. And if the 2 3s are the same, we look here, and the 2 and the 9 and the 1's the smallest, or the least is the 2. So 32 would be first. Then we would put our finger for a space. And we already know that the biggest is 68, so the next least would be 39. Let's try a bigger number. This one has how many digits? 3. This one has how many digits? 4. And this one has 3 digits. Well, 4 digits, more digits, bigger number. I know that's the biggest. But let's look and find the smallest one right now. So let's look at the next 2 numbers in the hundreds. 2 is the same. In the tens, 2 and a 0. Which is the smallest? The 0. So we know that the 202 is the least, or the smallest. I'll write 202. Put your finger here for a space between the numbers. The next one is the other 3-digit number, 220. And then the biggest number, put your finger here for a space. And it's 2,202. 2,202. You can push pause, make sure you have that. Explain how you can tell which number is the greatest. You can tell your home helper. That would be a great thing to do right now. Push pause. I'm going to erase that. And I think you guys are going to be set to do your independent practice. Let's try the first one together. Now I can think of a number line. Which one is the smallest? To the left. If I made a number line, we have, let's read these numbers first. Remember that colon, it's called a semicolon. This dot and this here separates the numbers. That means 303 is a number. We have 303, and here's another one. That means the second number is 30, and the last number is 3,003. 3,003. I could have those numbers on my place value chart. And then make sure you wipe them nice and hard and erase those so it stays nice and clean. Well, it says this time greatest to the least. So we'll start with the biggest. Can you see the biggest number? Well, 4 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, is bigger than 2 digits, 1, 2, and it's bigger than 3 digits, 1, 2, 3. So you can just count the digits on this one. We look, there's only one that has thousands. And remember, put your finger for a space and write the next number, which is going to be 303. And then put your finger for a space, and the next one is 30. And you can see the 3 numbers. Keep in mind that this symbol right there is what we use to separate them, but we're not going to draw that in. We're going to just put our finger and space our numbers apart so it's easy to read. You guys can do it. I know you can. Thanks for always doing a beautiful, wonderful job.